Thank you for putting out the Slack message more. All right, we are live on YouTube.
All right.
Exciting.
Oh wait, I wanted to send the same message in liquids. Copy. Boom.
You got two watching, one of which is me.
Nice.
We are all repping too. That's very nice.
Yeah.
I actually like your shirt a lot, Jack. Like the baseball style.
Yeah.
It's cool.
You can thank Charlie for that one.
Really? Charlie suggest that
He did
style?
all the merch. He selected
Really?
all the merch. Yep.
That's really
Well, did you also hear that he only got like size mediums for everything? And only like size smalls for the sweatpants?
Why?
The sweatpants look absolutely ridiculous on me. Like to the point where I gave them to Judy because I couldn't wear them. It was
That's really funny.
Was it like accidental or was it just like
Yeah,
just,
it was
they-
like it was something on the supplier's end.
Oh, okay.
But the shirts turned out nice. And the mediums are run a little big, so they fit me just fine. And I have nothing but good things to say about the blue apparel.
It's
Oh,
a really
I
nice
haven't-
apparel. It's like
Get some.
that.
Do you still have a discount,
Oops, there we
Brent?
go. Hold on. No, not right now.
Damn it.
But I
Nah,
honestly,
no.
the best out of them all, SpaceX. SpaceX is like the best fitting shirts that I own.
Their t-shirts are so soft and comfortable.
Yes.
Yeah,
They're so
they're
nice.
good stuff.
How's the Rocket Lab merch and the Microsoft merch on a scale of 1 to 10?
I mean, it's good. They really need more variety. Like all we have is t-shirts
Yeah.
and mission patches. It's kind of lame.
There's a lot of different merch that you can get, but it's all just like slapping a logo on it.
You said you want the Rocket Lab vest though, or jacket.
Oh my god, the jacket! I seriously might just go back for the jacket. Like, it is so nice.
What a reason to go work for a company.
The jacket, and I really want to steal one of the mugs. The mugs were
Yeah.
cool, or the champagne glasses.
Champagne, they have champagne
Really?
glasses, so, or
Oh my
Sorry,
god,
sorry.
like the Rocket Lab logo like etched on it, like
Yeah.
that's sick.
Well, no, it has the atom on it.
oh man. Oh,
I'm assuming they bring those out for successful launches.
Yep. Yeah.
And
It was.
and then I
cool.
looked at the store as well, and you see the $1 million coin.
Yeah, and the coin, which I actually saw them this summer.
That's cool.
But
Just-
Okay. Do you guys want to get started, Jack?
Yes. Yeah, it's 8 right now. Hello, hi to everyone who's watching. Today is a more low-key episode of our workshop series. Today we have 4 of our members that have been working hard on this podcast here to talk about some of the internship experiences we've been lucky enough to have over our summers here as college students and some even earlier. So just going around, I'm Jack.
My name's Bryn. I'm a junior in electrical engineering at Purdue.
I'm Andrew. I'm a junior in computer engineering at Purdue.
and I'm a junior in aerospace engineering.
And to complete it, I'm a junior in multidisciplinary engineering. Yeah, so just to kick off the discussion here, our first question is pretty simple. So, what companies did you guys all work for? We also all have merch on to celebrate.
Yeah, we're all repping that.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go first. We can establish an order.
Yeah.
So this past summer, as well as the 3 summers prior, I interned at Blue Origin, which is like, obviously the space company I've worked at, as this is our Midwest Rocket Tree Forum podcast. But I also have a few other internship experiences I might bring up later, working more in government kind of side of things and things like that. So.
Andrew?
Yeah, so I last summer I interned at Microsoft as an Explore intern. So that is their freshman sophomore internship program that they have. Yeah, it was my first official internship, and it was done at their headquarters. If it wasn't COVID, then it would have been in person, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later on.
Yeah, and then I interned as a manufacturing engineer at Rocket Lab this summer. That was really kind of my first real engineering experience, which was really cool and kind of diving right into deep water right away.
And then for me, I worked a couple places. My most recent internship was at a startup called Agile Space Industries, which is in Durango, Colorado. They make thrusters for in-space propulsion. And then previously, I worked as an intern at Norman Filter Company, which makes fluid filters for space and other applications. And I love both of them. And so, continuing, within those companies, what kind of positions have you had as an intern, and what kind of work were you doing in those positions?
At Blue, I interned in so many different roles, which I'm super grateful for. Especially because I think like one benefit of finding a company you really like and staying there for a while is you get to like go and rotate around and see what you really like. I spent one summer in a structural design and configuration group, where I mainly worked on like data analysis of engineering processes, and looking at a ton of data that would and looking at like engineering discrepancies and seeing how far that would put us off schedule for different gating events. My second summer at Blue, I worked as a test operations intern in some of our larger fluids test stands. My third summer at Blue, I worked as a test engineer again, but more on the production side, so more of like acceptance and qualification testing of life component, acceptance and qualification testing of like components that needed to be integrated onto the vehicle. And then my last summer, I spent a summer on the operations team. So that was more like kind of ops manual writing, flight rule development, kind of like more of the behind the scenes operations side of things. The kind of work I get to do, I'm very fortunate that I have interned at a company where I've gotten to do a ton of like really awesome hands-on work and gotten to see a lot of sides of, hands-on running my own tests to writing like important documentation that we need and things like that. So a lot of different work.
For me last summer, as an Explore intern, what I did was basically, the program was about learning about software development as well as program management and having to try out both. And so I was on the Microsoft 365 team, which is the online subscription. We're able to use Office. And I was working with them on mainly on software, but as well as take on a program management role as well.
And then as part of the manufacturing team, I directly supported the avionics department. So basically working on all the avionics components that go on the engine. And the kind of work I got to do as a manufacturing engineer is really focusing on the different processes we have, making every part, trying to find ways to improve it, working really close with the technicians and the design teams and making those changes so that we can increase the quality and the cadence for every part that's coming out.
And then moving on to myself. So at Agile, I didn't really have a super defined role within the company. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but the size of the company you intern at has a big impact on the kinds of work you do. So based on the day-to-day of the company could change wildly what I was doing. So I could be doing component design or analyzing a manufacturing process or helping to put something on the test stand or gathering and analyzing data based on a hot fire. Any of those things could have been in my docket on a daily. And the same kind of goes for Norman too. I was doing a lot of different kinds of work there. And yeah, the next question I have is, what would, in your last internship for some of us, what did your typical day-to-day kind of tasks look like while you were working?
My day-to-day tasks would vary a lot depending on every day. I think that's like kind of just how it goes in like an engineering setting. And I think that's one of the best things about engineering, in my opinion. I could never do the same thing every day. But a lot of the time I'd always have stand-up meetings with my mentor or other engineers because communication, as we know, is so important. If I was in one of my test internships, I would either be preparing like test procedures, trying to get people to review my procedures and sign off on them, or I'd be going around to different test centers and test places I needed to be, talking to different people, talking with people who are in charge of priority and prioritizing different projects. So really being in a place where I'm talking to so many different people. I think sometimes, like, especially like being in college, you're so used to just talking to your fellow classmates and the people on your technical team that you don't realize, like, when you get into a role in engineering, that you have to literally talk to everyone. There are so many stakeholders, like, internally on your project. So a lot of talking, a lot of communication, a lot of pinging and emailing people. There are definitely, but then there are days where you're sitting just like in front of MATLAB, or you're sitting just writing or making presentations. So really varied day to day for me.
The day-to-day work for me mainly has been a mix between working with, so I had a group of 2 other interns that I worked together on a specific project that the team had. Usually start off with like weekly goal meetings, and then we started working together on the project and doing some of the code. Every now and then we'd have meetings from other teams, asking for feedback. There was a time where I had to do a meeting over with some folks over in China to be able to go over some of the systems that they had, and how we were able to adapt that into our project, as well as talk with a bunch of mentors, do a whole lot of intern-related events, as well as finish up with a presentation that kind of encapsulates everything that we did for our team, as well as within the department that I was in.
I think for me, it's kind of similar to what Brent said. Working on a production floor, you really don't know what's going to be the challenge or obstacle for the day. But we started every day with like a big production team-wide meeting to kind of discuss what goals we want to hit for the day and for the week, and the deliveries that we need to make, and what's holding them up. And then from then on, you kind of move to maybe run through some quality tickets, talk to the technicians about any like recurring issues they're seeing, or any major fixes that need to happen in order to really hit those goals and those deliveries. And that's kind of the main driver behind any day-to-day work that you're doing, is making sure you're clearing anything in the way of getting those parts out.
Yeah, and for me, every day of mine started with a stand-up meeting. Well, on a Zoom up meeting, I guess. And then we'd go over what needed to be done for the day, get people to clear the blockers in the way of their tasks during that meeting, and then follow-ups as needed throughout the day. And then we ended most every day with a meeting as well to talk about what needed to be done next. I think it's kind of interesting that at all the companies you worked at of such different scales, the morning meeting is kind of the constant there with such different needs, I guess. And then that kind of feeds nicely into my next question was, what was the culture like at your company, at the companies you all worked at? What did you like about it? Yeah.
The culture at Blue. I think the culture at Blue is really exciting and really awesome. I think they've cultivated a great culture. And it's something that they really pride themselves on. I think one of the main pillars of their culture is passion and passion for mission. And that's something you'll hear a lot when you're at Blue. It's a big company filled with a lot of really passionate people. And I love that about Blue, and I love working in an environment surrounded with so many passionate people. And it just makes you really excited when you go into work. It's really grounding to remember what it's like to be working towards these super long-term goals.
In terms of the culture at Microsoft, I know that Microsoft's really a proponent of continuous learning. So throughout their entire process, they've always considered the fact of growth mindset. You know, you've heard of fixed mindset and growth mindset. And so that's really been embedded into workplace. And so a lot of the times when in my project that I worked on, if there's something that didn't go right, it wasn't the end of the world. They weren't gonna like put you in a meeting and scrutinize you on anything, but they would definitely like see that as an opportunity for you to learn and understand what's going on. And they also made sure that you weren't really afraid to do any big things. So like a lot of things in my project, I would have to merge what I had in my project into the main code for the whole system. And for me, initially it was like super nerve-wracking because you're going to be messing up. You might be messing up something that millions of people are being impacted with. But they say that it's fine if there's a bug that comes up, it'll be fine. You'll be able to improve on it, work on it, and then it's all part of the process of having a growth mindset and continuously learning. And I think that's really awesome to cultivate.
For sure.
I think Rocket Lab as a company, I guess, is in a very kind of unique situation where the company is growing really rapidly, and it's also a global company with a lot of our team members being over at New Zealand. So I don't really know like what to say about the company culture as a whole, but I can definitely say that within the production team, it can be really stressful working on the production floor and hitting those deadlines, and things can get heated and stressful. But at the end of the day, like because we all share that same goal, everyone is really open and helpful and wants to clear out and do whatever it takes to achieve the team's goal as a whole. And so that was the biggest thing that I loved about working there this summer is everyone was just super supportive of whatever it is you need to get it done. They weren't afraid to make mistakes as long as you own up to it. And then at the end of the day, we're all coworkers and we all got to hang out together and have fun after work, which was really cool.
Yeah, and then my experience was with a startup. It's such a small company and everything is so closely knit. I obviously knew every person in the company by name. We had some company barbecues. Everyone was there, and it was like only a couple, like 3 or 4 cars, and it was a really good time. And also, so many people there were of the opinion that failures help you learn, and that was something that was really, really a breath of fresh air when you're an intern and you don't know a lot. You come in and you want to feel that when you make a mistake that you're not going to be penalized for it, which is great. Yeah. Yeah, and then Maura, you mentioned before that there was some differences in time zones for the company. How was that?
Yeah, that was, I think, not only time zones, but kind of the biggest thing that I had to get used to and learn is just the different cultures you work with. Just working with people that come from significantly different backgrounds and live in a whole different country with a different culture was a really cool learning experience, because I never had to work with anything like that. But I think you kind of get used to it pretty quickly. But it's still, it can't create like issues and obstacles just because of like simple misunderstandings, because we come from different backgrounds. But I think it just makes you like a better person and a better teammate, understanding how to work like that. And the time zones were surprisingly not as horrible. It actually works out kind of nicely because New Zealand is like a day ahead, and so you get like a whole extra work day for the week, because like they work when the US doesn't, or the US works when we don't on weekends. But it was definitely a really cool, unique learning experience.
And then Andrew, you said you were working with some people over in Microsoft China. Was that somewhat similar?
Yeah, for sure. I had to every now and then have to do calls with the team in China, and there was definitely some things with language barriers as well as cultural differences. That was something that I really had to learn. It was a really great experience to be able to do for sure.
Nice. So we talked a little bit about differences in time zones. What kind of role did location have into how you liked your internship, and how important do you think location is for someone who's trying to find an internship?
I would say definitely keep an open mind when you're looking for internships, and don't let location necessarily be the first thing that turns you off. There's some really cool companies all around the country, all around the globe. I know that I interned at Blue, and that was pretty close to home for me. So I got to live at home and commute, which is something I really liked. But I know some people like to go farther away from home. I think it's just up to the individual.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Brent on this one. On it's definitely up to you. If you want to go far, definitely go for it. If you want to go find a place that's closer to home, definitely go for that as well. For me, Microsoft was a little bit more closer to home for me, so it was it was more familiar for the area that I've been in, and sort of the experiences that I've been with. But definitely like don't I would say like completely up to you on the location. And it's something that like could be definitely a great learning experience if you wanted to try and go somewhere else.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think especially if you are looking for kind of that first experience, you really can't let location be the main factor, because it is really important to stay open-minded and just take anything that comes your way. But not that I can complain about working in Los Angeles. It was a really cool and really fun time, just being in like the heart of the aerospace community, and working from like all these other cool companies across the street. But location definitely wasn't like the main factor. It was just the company that I wanted to work for.
Yeah, I completely agree with everyone else who said it was not their main factor, but to keep an open mind. And then also another thing I would say is, if you are looking for something close to home, you may be surprised what kinds of companies live right next door. I had no idea who Norman Filter Company were before I looked at them through recommendation, and then I was able to commute from home every day in the Chicago area, which is not a big aerospace hub, at least for the hardware side. And then this summer, I worked in Durango, Colorado, which was also amazing. Super awesome place. Yeah. And then kind of leaning into the first time internship experience. So what was your journey of job searching like before you got your internships?
I definitely have I think all four of us have really different stories when it comes to this. I started interning at Blue in high school, back when they had a high school internship program, and I accepted return offers every summer. Yeah, and then for my other internships I've had besides that, I just applied through an application.
For me, it was pretty straightforward. I just threw my resume into the many other resumes that existed for Purdue. I guess another nice thing is that since I live a little closer to the headquarters, I was able to take advantage of maybe a couple of seminars that they had and be able to learn more about it. So I guess those are like stories that I was able to talk about. But I would say that like that's definitely like not like the reason why I would have gotten in. I think it's you don't have to like have those certain privileges and advantages that you have to be able to apply and get into any company that you want to go for. I would say that's a passion and a willingness to learn and a continual desire to keep going. I think that's something that is more important than trying to go to take advantage of other of opportunities that the companies might have nearby you.
Yeah, I definitely had quite a journey to end up at Rocket Lab last year. So I finally got my green card the year beforehand, and so I was finally eligible to even start searching for a job. And then just throughout that year, I had like just really struggled to kind of get through, the big application system and get those interviews. And I watched as like September, October, like the whole first semester went by and people were locking down internships. And, even being in aerospace, I wasn't eligible for a lot of those positions regardless because of security clearances and whatnot. Um, and then how I ended up at Rocket Lab was really just through kind of a random connection um, that I made through an organization here on campus with an alumni from the organization who was working there. I basically just, sent him a message on LinkedIn, and then a few months later, I got an interview. I never like went through a proper application process, and I guess stemming from that, just the biggest thing I took away is you kind of just have to put your head down and plow through and try all the different avenues you can get, and definitely like don't get discouraged when you see like other people locking down jobs, and it's it can happen in any way basically.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I also went through kind of the same thing that Moore did, where I had a tough time locking down positions, getting through the application process. I mean, last fall for me, I was still not placed in an engineering major that wasn't first year engineering, so that was kind of a barrier for me to getting some of these positions. In addition to just being a sophomore, which is tough. And then spring rolled around, still didn't really have anything on the docket. I was just like very active on Twitter, and one of my followers, like I didn't even know about Agile at the time. One of my followers reached out to me when I was like complaining on Twitter about not having secured an internship, and I was like, "You might want to apply here." So I applied, I interviewed, and I got the position, which was a really unique opportunity, and not one that I would recommend to people. Don't rely on Twitter to get a job, but it does go to show that things can come from anywhere. Like, don't turn down opportunities. And uh, how what was it like working with some of the other interns um, at your position? How was that for you guys, especially in an online COVID environment?
I think it's like harder to form bonds with the other interns in like an online environment. I know like back in the days when I was interning in person, like I was super close with the interns. We'd go hiking on the weekends. We'd go out to dinner once a week. But it's definitely harder, I think, in online environment. I know our online interns, we had like a Slack set up for outside of work talk that we would talk on, and then we had an internal like messaging system that we had a group chat on that we could talk about like work stuff on. So that's kind of how we stayed connected.
Yeah, my experience is pretty similar to Bryn's. Yeah, normally if everything was in person, we would be, all, hanging out, going to dinner, hiking on the weekends for sure. Since the internship that I have was virtual, so I worked with two other interns, two other interns. One of them was from Canada, another one was from the DC area, and they actually like worked remotely there. And so it was really cool to like learn more about like where they live and sort of like I always hear from the one from the DC area about the storms that are coming in, and so like their power might go out, and it's just like really interesting to see that sort of the differences that are going on, and then hearing some of the stories from the one from Canada about like what her community is like in the area. So I guess it's really cool to like the advantage of a work environment, you get to like see them where they are, but definitely like within that like like that connection between people is definitely something that's been lacking for sure.
Yeah, I was definitely very lucky this summer to work in person. And in terms of other interns, it was, I think, 5 of us total. So we definitely got super close. Some of us lived together, and we were kind of all thrown into deep waters on our own. So we had, at least we had each other to figure things out. And I mean, you basically just like automatically gain best friends because you go through the same stuff and face the same problems. And it was also really cool. I was the youngest one of the group, so some of the other interns had like really cool experiences that they came into the position with, and I got to learn a lot from them and just make really good connections.
And then my experience was about half and half. So the first half of my internship roughly was remote. I was working from home. And the second half, we were able to go out to Durango in person, about half the time in person, about half the time working remotely during the day. So that was interesting because I basically worked with 2 other interns for like a month and a half without really knowing a whole lot about them, like other than sitting on meetings and a couple of brief Slack chats. And then you would go out and you actually meet them, and you get to go out and like hike with them and do a bunch of other fun stuff. And it kind of shows like the limitations of remote work. The remote work is good in a lot of respects, and also something that we all had to get used to, I think. And then my next question for everyone is, how did you adapt to working from home in an internship position, and any tips for people going into a work from home situation in a new internship position?
I definitely just had a lot of had to focus on being focused. I think the main thing is just communicating a ton and sending a ton of like pings and messages and emails, schedule meetings if you're unsure about things, just like kind of make sure like, I think the biggest thing is like when I'm in person, I have to remind myself not to be afraid to ask questions. And I feel like that like fear of speaking out is like exemplified in an online environment. And so that was definitely something I struggled with and had to get over, because it was like, I feel like every time you're just like, God, I wish I would have asked that question like when I first had it and didn't wait on it. And I feel like in person, I'm like easier just like talking. So that was definitely like something I struggled with and had to get used to.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely in the same boat. So I was super excited to be able to go there in person until I think about like a month before I started. They decided to go make everything virtual. Definitely, like some things that I had to adapt was so like in Microsoft you have to like like what Bryn had to do, like ask a lot of questions and connect with your mentors a lot. And so that was really difficult because there usually be like, well, so normally in person you would like just go by their office, and just say, hey, I have a question on this. But because everything was virtual, like you have to like ping them on chat or like have a specific window of time to be able to ask questions. So that was a struggle. And then sort of keeping focus and being communicative, as well as being able to take in like all the different notifications and different meetings that you can be in. Because everything was virtual, your schedule looked a lot crazier, I would say, than before. And so just trying to be able to sort of take time to sort of space out your meetings and be able to take breaks, go to the bathroom if you need to, take a walk if you need to. Just because sitting in your room all day can be really tough, and it can be mentally draining. So definitely try to adapt to that. And one thing that I did personally was once it was time for me to work, I like physically like changed clothes into something that's fit, something that I wouldn't be encouraged to like go to sleep in. So I like didn't wear sweatpants. I wore jeans instead. And I think that was also a good like mental mindset to be able to change and say, okay, I'm working right now. There's stuff I need to do. So yeah, it's definitely a different experience to be able to go remote.
I thought you were going more. I know your internship was in person.
Yeah, I don't have much to say. Sorry.
Yeah. So for my remote part of work, so when I was at home, what I found was most helpful is like what Andrew said, like make time, make breaks, and also changing clothes. What I did is I kept a pair of shoes in like the home office I was using. And so putting on shoes kind of helped me feel like I was, actually working. And then also I would say if it's something that's available to you and you're in a remote position, try to set up like, if not a whole room, a corner of the house that doesn't get much attention, and use that as an office space. That really helps. And then also the nice thing about having a dedicated space to work at is then when you need to take a break, you can actually like physically remove yourself. Whereas if I were to be working in my room all day, I would just like not leave. That was big. And then also just like keeping up with meetings and like a virtual schedule is way more draining than you think it would be.
I want to ask this perspective. I don't know what you guys think. Would you guys prefer to have to be able to work from home, or would you prefer to be in person?
For me, at least, I'd say in person was better, for sure.
I'd absolutely say in person, but I think like obviously like personally I'm an extrovert and I like really enjoy being around people and doing things with my hands. So I'd have to go in person.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I would prefer in person as well. I definitely see the benefits of working from home. You don't have to worry about commuting or any of that hard stuff, but I definitely
Yeah.
love that collaborative aspect.
I think also hopefully moving on in the future, like when we're past COVID and everything, I definitely think like there's a lot of value in having it as an option. Like if you're like recovering from like an illness, or if you're injured, or if you need to just be at your house waiting for delivery, like I definitely see a lot of benefits to having it be an option. And I think it definitely will be an option now on moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and another thing I kind of think about that is it also kind of opens up more opportunities for time slots for people to intern. Like I personally know of some people that are trying to get positions for winter when people don't typically have internships hosted, just because when you're in a virtual format, like the cost of moving you out and like all that stuff don't actually exist. And one thing I kind of forgot when I was saying about virtual work is I even if you're working in a time zone that's only like one or two time zones off where the rest of the company is working, it can still make a pretty big difference in your workday. So you need to consider that. I was in Central Time and the rest of the company was in Mountain Time. So often I'd be working till like 7:30 at night, my time, which that kind of ate into like the rest of your day, I think.
Yeah, I have to test that from what Jack said, because the other intern that I worked with who's in DC, she had to start. So like I was in Pacific time, and so was the one from Canada. So we all started at around 9 or 10 o'clock, but that would be like noon or 1 o'clock for her. And so she usually like did all of her routines, like her nighttime routines, shifted over to the morning, and then she would usually finish it probably around like we usually finish around 5, so like around 8 o'clock at night. So it's definitely something to like work through and try to adapt as well.
Yeah. On from COVID. So, what do you think? What kinds of experience and traits do employers value in an intern, especially someone who's like a first-time intern?
I'd say the number one thing to advertise yourself with and to display is like authenticity. I think people a lot of the time think that they need to have the most CAD packages, the most programming languages, and straight A's to like get an internship, but that's like really not the case. I think one of the main things employers look for is authenticity. At the end of the day, employers want to hire someone that they want to work with. And you should be someone that other people want to work with. You know what I mean? Be someone who's willing to learn, showing willingness to learn and passion for the company. I'd say one main thing is like identifying with the company and their mission. But I think it all kind of roots back to like authenticity and like that kind of bubble. Another thing a lot of like these really bigger like engineering companies look for is like your participation in a technical project at school, whether that's a rocket team or a formula team or a satellite team, et cetera, like that's definitely something that just, again, it just shows you're authentically passionate towards like engineering and things like that. So I'm going to say authenticity.
You know, I gotta say, I think Bryn has the right word. I think authenticity is something that is definitely necessary. Definitely like showing a passion, have a willingness to learn. I know for Microsoft, that's like the number one thing that they see is just the willingness to learn, as well as making sure that it would be someone that you would want to that they would want to work with. And so that was sort of like in my interview process, that was sort of the main idea behind the entire interview was your willingness to learn and sort of see the way. It's just they want to see how you think, and so they want to see your passion. They want to see your learning process, so that they know how you work within a team. And like also what Brent said with showing your technical team or other experiences, just definitely show that you're passionate in what you want to do. You don't have to have like the best achievements or the number one in something, but definitely just demonstrate that you have a passion and desire and constant growth of learning. I think those are definitely super important to have.
Yeah, I think along with what Andrew said about willingness to learn, it's also I think it's important to convey like a willingness to fail and to learn from failure. I think like Andrew said, it's not important to have all these achievements, but it is important to have a variety of experiences, whether they went well or not. As long as you talk about what you learn from those experiences. So I think employers want to see that you have an open mind going into a challenge, going into something that you're not sure how to do, because that's what you're going to be faced with during your job. And if you have experience in tackling a difficult problem that you have no tools to solve beforehand, but just accepting that and doing the best that you can is the biggest thing to show an employer.
And then one thing that I personally can say is my grades, frankly, are not very good. And I'm not in a recognizable engineering major. Multidisciplinary engineering is not something that's universal to a lot of schools. And so that still really hasn't been a huge barrier for me, to be honest. It's all about selling yourself and having the right attitude. I think if you go into an interview with the right attitude, that means a lot to employers. For small companies in particular, I think one thing that a lot of them look for is being independent and scrappy, like being able to take on tasks without a whole lot of supervision. That's kind of a difference between large and smaller companies is you're often on your own for a lot more of the time because people are really busy and don't have a whole lot of, and often like it'll be a little longer before you get responses, stuff like that. The other thing I'll say is technical team experience was a constant among all the other interns and many of the full-time employees that I worked with as well. And then just kind of leaning into what I just said. So there are quite a few differences between large and small companies. For Brandon and Andrew, who worked at very large companies of differing degrees, and then Moore, who's working at a growing company, and me at a small company, I think it'd be interesting if we could talk about some of the differences between them.
Well, to be clear, Andrew worked at like a huge company.
Yes.
I worked at a pretty big, a decently sized company.
Yeah.
Let's not compare the scale
Of Microsoft to Blue Origin. That's just true.
to anything else.
And Blue is
Huge
also
company.
growing.
Yeah, Blue is still growing. Yeah, I also have a unique perspective where I've worked at the same company where it's been two different sizes. In my first internship at Blue, there were still less than 1,000 people working at the company, and in my last internship at Blue, the company was over 3,000. And I think it's been really like interesting to watch the company grow and get to experience growing pains and get to also experience how much more they can do as a bigger company. And it's really exciting. So I'd say that there are like definitely benefits. There are pros and cons to working at a big company, at a small company. It just depends on you and your personal preference. And interning at multiple places and getting a feel for different size companies might be the way to help you figure out what's best for you.
Yeah, yeah. Where I work with it, Microsoft is a pretty big company. I will say that their internship program has been something that they've been doing for decades, and so it's pretty well established in what they do, and so the process they had has been pretty much the same over the years. You do have opportunities to switch out to different teams and try out different parts, but usually that's been set on so like when you first start. When you would go through the interview process, they sort of gauge what sort of areas you would be most interested in, and then they would have you interview with that area that you'd be most interested in. And then from there, then you're able to see like, okay, how do I feel about working on, so like for me, it was Microsoft 365. So like how I felt working with that kind of team, the area that I'm in, sort of the software and coding that I would have to do. And then about halfway or 3/4 of the way through, you have an opportunity to be able to switch to a different team if you really want to. So if you say want to go to Xbox or something, you have the opportunity to try that out and see. And so you're able to like talk with the manager in charge of that and see what it's like, and you'll be able to try it out for a bit. And so yeah, that's definitely a difference between working at a smaller company and a larger company. For a smaller company, you definitely have more opportunity to be able to try different things right away. But for a larger company like Microsoft, there is a process that you have to go through to be able to switch to a different team, but it's definitely not like the same process that you would have to go through when you have like as a candidate for a normal internship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, very unlike Microsoft. This was the second summer I think Rocket Lab has ever had an intern. and the first summer they've had multiple interns. So, that obviously comes with a lot of growing pains, and again, just kind of being thrown into a situation where the people who are your mentors have never had an intern that they were in charge of, and the team itself, was never kind of prepared. But that also kind of comes with a lot of freedom. And I think that goes to even just being a regular full-time employee on the team, is you get to do a lot of different things and wear a lot of different hats. And that is something we say a lot, because you never know what challenges are going to be presented, and you kind of just have to use your knowledge and then apply it wherever you're told, and fix whatever is in front of you. So I think it was really cool kind of getting that freedom to work on almost anything and help with anything that you had interest in. But also, because it is a slightly bigger company, there is like some structure obviously to it. But it was really cool kind of seeing a company in that stage that is growing really, really fast and having to adapt to that growth and change.
And then my experience was at a really small company. So for context, within the first week of joining the company, I had designed a part and had it printed for use in assembling one of our components. So I was thrust into the fire really, really fast. And the other interesting part about small companies is a lot of times they're still kind of figuring stuff out, which is really exciting. So when you work on something, that thing you work on might be part of the company for years and years into the future. You're kind of helping to build the DNA at that point. And that also has some cons. Like, it can be really stressful to just be thrust into the fire without a whole lot of wisdom given directly to you. And you have to be scrappy and figure out things for yourself or ask the right people. But I can also kind of relate to what Moore said. Like, wearing many hats is kind of the phrase that you hear when you go to work for a small company. Like, if you can pull out that phrase in an interview, I feel like you will impress a lot of people, and that will drastically increase your chance of getting hired at a smaller company.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Pro interview tip.
For sure.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes left. If anyone has questions, you can type them in the chat. I assume we have about 3 people on right now. I guess in the meantime, while we wait for questions, I'm going to ask one more to everyone here, which is, what would you change about your internship experience, and how could it have been more successful?
I don't know. I kind of like how they went. I think I got to try 4 really different areas. I think I learned a lot about each area. Like, I've had 4 internships in very different areas, so I kind of was able to be like, I like this and I don't like this. And I wouldn't necessarily say interning in an area I didn't know wasn't for me is something I would have changed. Just because I think it was really important for me to be like, I like test engineering most, and I like that more than operations. And I'm glad that I did try out something that wasn't necessarily where my heart and soul and what I love to do lies, if that makes sense. And same with my first few internships, obviously weren't engineering related, super engineering related or anything, but they were stepping stones to way bigger places. And at smaller companies and high school internships before I started at Blue. And to definitely if you haven't had an internship yet, just try looking at everywhere you can, all the small places, everywhere, all the places. There are so many companies you don't even know exist. So I don't even know how to answer that. Nothing.
I will say for me, there are definitely a couple things that I look back and I'm just like, oh yeah, I should have done that. I think one thing was having a better connection with your manager and the people you work with a lot more. I think it's hard, once your first internship, it's hard to be able to have sort of the confidence and the desire to be able to well, for me, I'm a little bit more introverted, so like, being able to talk with other people, that's a bit more difficult for me. But I think having connection with my manager, that was like, if every week my manager and I would have one-on-ones and we would talk about things. And so I feel like making sure that you have a better connection with your manager, because your manager is there to help you out as much as possible. Like, even though it's their job to make sure that, that everything's on track, he also wants to make sure that you succeed in the position that you're in. And so that was something that I wish I recognized more, be able to take advantage of that. And I think another big thing was communication. I mean, in a virtual world, communication is hard, especially when you have like certain times of the day where you have to like set up a meeting for. But I really wish I had a better desire to just send a message out, and if they can't answer it, like, it's fine. But just being more willing to communicate and talk about any concerns and questions that you have.
Yeah, I think going off of that, the biggest thing I regret is not speaking up earlier, and not like having the confidence to ask as many questions as I should have. And so I think the biggest thing for me was when I came in, I was assigned a project. It was kind of like my big project that I was supposed to take on and look at. And I, looking into it for the first couple of weeks, I kind of realized that maybe it didn't really have the potential that I wanted to have for my internship, but I really didn't say much about it until about halfway through. And then when I finally like confronted my mentor and my manager, they were super open. They were super happy to hear that feedback. And from then on, I was basically assigned like 6 different projects, and I got to like finish all of them in the last half of my internship. But then it kind of made me look back and say, I kind of wasted those first few weeks. And I know that's something, you're told to go into an internship, like ask questions, don't be afraid to do that. But I think it is really hard to do that, especially if it's your first experience. And I think that is definitely the biggest thing I would change is if you do realize that what you're working on is not what you want to do, not what you want your like impact to look like, say something, and you're going to end up in a better place for it.
Yeah, and then I think I'm noticing a pattern here, and I'm also going to fit into that pattern. I would also say that one thing I definitely could have done better is take better use of the resources that I was given. There were times during my internship where I kind of hit myself against the wall for like hours at a time in something like in like a SolidWorks file or something, and then after that I like desperately asked someone, and they're like, "Oh, do you do this?" And I'm like, well, I could have saved like 5 hours of my time if I had just asked at the beginning instead of trying to do it myself. And it's really hard to learn that.
Definitely agree with that. And another thing that I learned was that the project that I was in, I literally knew nothing about it. Like, it was the project I worked on specifically was sort of more quality assurance on the service, and the systems that they use and the sort of websites that you go into in the program that they have are, they're internal, and there's like no one, like, I had no idea about it. And so like the first couple weeks for me was just spending on trying to figure out like, what is this, what does it do, sort of what's behind it, like, and what's the code like. And so taking advantage of your mentor and your manager and the people around you on explaining that kind of stuff, that would have saved me a week of learning, I think. And that was just because I just didn't have that confidence to be able to ask questions and be able to just say, like, literally, what does this button do? And like, what is this website for? I think that's something that's, like everyone else is saying, it's just something that like I wish I was able to do more.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's an important thing to realize that, you're there to kind of come on for the summer or however many weeks you're going to be there for to make an impact. But it is also, I think it is even more important for you to learn and take a lot more than maybe it is for you to give back to the company. And I think companies realize that, and your managers realize that, and people are, they're there to help you learn. I think like Andrew, I was thrown into the avionics department, and I could probably count on one hand the number of times I touched a PCB in my life beforehand. I had zero experience with electronics and avionics and anything like that. But as long as you ask questions and you're not afraid to go out and try and just sound stupid, but people are going to answer your questions and help you learn, and they want to help you learn.
Yeah, and to kind of finish things off, like one of the most important things I remember from my internship over the summer was I was having a conversation with one of my coworkers about this part I had designed earlier in the summer, and then I came out and saw it, and it didn't work when they tried to use it. And I was like, oh, there's the part I made that didn't work. And he's like, oh yeah, I can't even count the number of parts I made that didn't work. And that was just something that stuck out to me. Like, oh wait, I'm not the only one who fails. that was good. All right, we have 3 more minutes for comments if anyone wants to leave them in the chat. Otherwise, thank you everyone for joining me today. This is a great talk.
Thank you. And also, we can just end with some advice, and then we can.
Yes.
I'd say the number one piece of advice I have is make sure you have someone else read your resume. Don't be afraid. Have someone else read your resume and your cover letter, because oftentimes your friends and peers can talk better and point out things that you do and your strengths better than you can. It's always good to have a second set of eyes on things. So.
Yes, 100% agree. And another thing I would say is if you can find someone who's tangentially, I don't care if it's your brothers, uncles, friends, dogs, house sitters, brother, to look at, if they work at that company, you want to get someone from that company to read it if you have that connection. Doesn't matter how far-fetched it is. I think that's probably invaluable, because someone who works at that company will have a much better idea of what they're looking for. Even if they don't work in hiring, they've been hired. They know what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think something that we talked about earlier, but is just the biggest thing I learned, is that, an internship or a job can really come from anywhere. You do not have to go through the usual career fair or just general application, but what you do have to do is just put in the work and try different avenues, different connections, reach out to people, and just be open to really anything, especially if it's your first time looking around.
Yeah. Awesome.
I think for me, a piece of advice I would have of sort of stepping up from what Bryn said with having someone else read your resume. I would say practice interviewing. I think there's an amazing resource that I found that's called Big Interview, and it's basically just like Khan Academy but for interviewing. And so they go over every aspect of what kind of questions people would ask, and sort of ways for you to practice yourself and be able to gather that information so you're prepared for it. And that has helped me wonders in the interview process that I had to go through. And then also, if you don't have that resource, you can definitely have someone else talk to you and do mock interviews, or if you're in a university, take advantage of the career center that you might have to be able to help you out with that. There's more resources to this kind of stuff than you might think, and I think that's pretty cool to have.
Awesome. Well, that's it, folks. That was really great. Thank you, everyone, once again for joining. For everyone who didn't catch this, we'll be able to post it later on our YouTube channel to watch it anytime. And then stay tuned for this weekend, where, well, not this weekend, next weekend, we'll be releasing our next podcast episode. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jack.
See you.